That's a really good question. And I think it kind of depends on how the corporation looks at it, right? So if we go back and just a quick lesson here from a history standpoint, which I think most of you in the center would understand. If we go back to the 70s, why was it that Milton Friedman was able to say with a straight face, the purpose of a corporation is to make money? Because we had a functioning government that actually did stuff to help society in a way that we don't have today. We have a dysfunctional government. And we also, back in the 80s, all agreed, not all of us, but many people agreed with Reagan and Thatcher that business can solve your problems. I think what most business people did not realize is that people would take them seriously and understand that businesses can do a better job. And then the expectations for business went through the roof. So now we have these expectations that are ridiculous for companies to follow, and employees in particular, but customers as well. I always like to say about customers, though, they talk thin and eat fat is the way I describe it. They'll have a Diet Coke with their Big Mac, metaphorically speaking. And what that means is that they say they won't buy products from companies and they won't do this and they won't do that. And then they'll go on a cruise, which is, one of the worst industries from a responsibility standpoint. Or they'll recycle, but they won't care about the seafood industry, which is incredibly disruptive and under attack. So I think that this is part of the problem, is that the expectations for corporations on the part of employees and customers and communities and all kinds of constituencies are through the roof. And the real question is, how much will you let that influence what you do? Well, again, you are not in business exclusively to make the world a better place. I mean, your number one priority, your number one responsibility is to make enough money to keep the company afloat, right? So there's nothing more responsible than making enough money so that the company survives. We know that. But then we start to move on and think about, okay, how do I think about the other constituencies in my corporate life? And I have to make trade-offs. And I was thinking about this before when we were looking at that question, and I wrote some notes, and I don't even know that I actually said this, but I think it's important. Let's say under the constituency banner, for instance, that I'm thinking about one constituency that's influencing the equation more than another. So these constituencies disagree with each other, but you have to discuss and weigh the relative importance to the business. So a small customer segment is influencing you in one way with limited power versus your largest investor. I mean, do you really have a choice in that discussion? All right, now let's change the nature of that decision. It's about an issue of morality, as the organization has decided this is a moral issue. Now, who gets to decide what moral issues are and what aren't? It's an interesting question. Is Black Lives Matter a moral issue, but the Georgia vote is not? Is LGBTQ a moral issue, but the issues going on in China are not? With the Uyghurs, like, we don't care about Uyghurs, but we care about, so it goes on and on and on. I think that's where you really start to get into problems unless you know who you are. And I want to go back to that individual example that I gave before, Dina, because on an individual level, what I care about most, I give my money to, right? I do. And it matters a lot to me. So that when I'm involved in something that I feel passionately about, I want to help that cause. And given that I have a limited amount of resources, that's where I'm going to put my time and money, rather than giving to the United Way. And I have nothing against the United Way, but that's like scattershot philanthropy. It's not strategic philanthropy. The way we think about responsibility today is much more strategic overall. And I think speaking up is another strategic angle on the same issue. So the answer that I would have to my consumers is, do you really want us to speak up about something that we're really not doing anything about? We would like to spend some time not just studying the issue, but trying to actually do something about it before we say something. Or the same thing to our employees. We feel passionately about this, but we really can't do anything about it. I would love to have heard that conversation at Estee Lauder. I wonder what that was like. Well, you can't really do anything about this, but we're going to speak out on it anyway, because we have a lot of Asian Americans working in our New York office, or whatever the decision making is. There was a morality associated with it that seemed to be more profound. Like, we're not going to stand by and let this happen.